The midnight route. The cold wind whipped through the empty station, rattling the rusted sign that read Ash Hollow Transit Depot. Eliza stood under a flickering bulb, her fingers tightening around the strap of her backpack. She checked her watch. 11:47 p.m. The bus was late. She wasn't even supposed to be here. A series of train cancellations and car trouble had left her stranded in this forgotten corner of nowhere. When the clerk at the ticket booth handed her a ticket for the midnight bus to Ash Hollow, he hadn't looked up. Just slid it through the slot and muttered, "Last chance tonight." Eliza sighed and glanced down the road. Nothing but darkness. She checked her phone. No signal. Typical. Then she heard it. The low growl of an engine, growing louder. Moments later, headlights pierced the gloom, revealing the hulking silhouette of an old battered bus. It rolled to a stop with a wheezing sigh, its brakes screeching like a wounded animal. The destination sign blinked erratically. Route 66, Ash Hollow. The doors creaked open. The driver was unsettling. His gaunt face was pale, almost waxy, and his hollow eyes seemed to see straight through her. He didn't greet her, didn't say anything at all, just jerked his thumb toward the interior. Eliza hesitated. There was something about the bus, something wrong. The dim overhead lights cast long, shifting shadows over the torn seats and foggy windows. It smelled faintly of mildew and something else, something metallic. "Are you getting on or not?" The driver's voice was gravelly, impatient. Eliza swallowed her unease and climbed aboard. The doors clanged shut behind her, startling her. There were only a handful of passengers. An older woman near the front, her hands clutching a photograph so tightly her knuckles were white. A teenage boy slouched in a corner, earbuds in, his hoodie pulled low over his face. A middle-aged man, a few rows back, his eyes darting around nervously as he gripped a large duffel bag. And a little girl sitting alone near the rear, drawing quietly in a notebook. Eliza chose a seat near the middle, close enough to the other passengers to feel safe, but not too close to invite conversation. The bus lurched forward, the engine groaning like it was protesting the journey. As the miles passed, the bus settled into an eerie rhythm. The hum of the engine, the faint rattle of the windows, the occasional crackle of the radio, all of it felt off, like a soundtrack to a bad dream. Outside, the landscape was barren, endless stretches of empty highway, flanked by skeletal trees. Eliza tried to relax, but the unease gnawed at her. It wasn't just the bus, it was the passengers too. The older woman kept whispering to herself, clutching the photo tighter with every passing minute. The teenage boy never moved, his music faintly audible as a repetitive, droning beat. The man with the duffel bag glanced over his shoulder every few seconds, as if expecting someone or something to appear. And the little girl. Eliza turned slightly to look at her. She was hunched over her notebook, her pencil moving in sharp, deliberate strokes. Her face was blank, almost too calm, and she hadn't made a sound since the journey began. Curiosity got the better of her. "What are you drawing?" Eliza asked softly. The girl didn't look up. She finished a line, then another, before tilting the notebook so Eliza could see. Eliza froze. It was the bus, perfectly detailed, down to the torn seats and fogged windows. But the passengers weren't alone. Shadowy figures filled the aisles, their faces twisted into expressions of rage and anguish. "Where did you—" The bus jolted violently, throwing Eliza against the window. The lights flickered, and for a split second, she thought she saw movement in the aisle. The driver's voice crackled over the intercom. "Hold on tight. Just a bump in the road." Eliza's heart hammered in her chest. She looked back at the girl, but the notebook was closed, her pencil neatly tucked behind her ear. Something was very, very wrong. If you like my video, please make sure to subscribe to my channel for more interesting and chilling stories. Eliza's breathing slowed, but her mind raced. The girl's drawing was burned into her thoughts, her nerves tingling with the feeling that they weren't alone on this bus. She turned toward the window, trying to ground herself, but what she saw only made her grip the edge of her seat. The landscape outside wasn't changing. The same crooked tree with a broken branch. The same mile marker, its numbers too worn to read. The same rusted fence half swallowed by dead grass. Over and over, the scene repeated like a looped film reel. She glanced at the other passengers. Surely someone else noticed this. The older woman whispered feverishly to her photo, her lips trembling. Eliza could make out fragments of her words. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean. I had no choice." The teenage boy shifted in his seat, one earbud popping out. He didn't acknowledge the unsettling scene outside, only muttering a curse under his breath as he shoved the earbud back in. The man with the duffel bag, however, looked as if he had seen a ghost. His fingers twitched, gripping the bag so tightly. His knuckles went pale. His eyes darted to the windows, the aisle, the driver's shadowy figure. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. Eliza turned back to the little girl. Her head was down, her pencil scratching at the notebook again. "Eliza?" The voice was soft, almost a whisper. She whipped her head around, scanning the bus, but no one had spoken. "Eliza?" This time it was louder, clearer, a man's voice. She froze. Her name wasn't on her ticket. She hadn't told it to anyone on board. Slowly, she turned to the source of the sound. The intercom. "Eliza?" The voice crackled with static, distorted, yet undeniably calling for her. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she stood and staggered toward the front of the bus. "What the hell is going on?" she demanded, her voice shaking. The driver didn't look at her. He didn't even flinch. His skeletal hands gripped the wheel, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Or what should have been the road. The headlights illuminated only darkness, an endless void stretching beyond the windshield. She reached out to touch his shoulder. "Hey, I'm talking to you." The bus swerved violently. Eliza was thrown against the dashboard, gasping as the vehicle skidded to a stop. The engine wheezed and sputtered, then went silent. For a moment, there was only the sound of heavy breathing. Hers, the passengers, and something else. A low, guttural growl. The lights flickered and dimmed, casting the interior into long, wavering shadows. "Eliza?" The voice called again. This time from outside. She turned toward the door, which hissed open. A gust of icy air swept through the bus, carrying the scent of rotten decay. "No," the older woman whispered, clutching her photograph tighter. "No, no, no." The passengers' gazes turned to the door. Beyond it was nothing but blackness, yet the growl grew louder, and faint shapes began to emerge. Figures hunched and twisted, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The man with the duffel bag stood abruptly. "Close the door," he shouted, his voice cracking. The driver remained motionless. "Close it, damn it," the man screamed, reaching for the controls. Before he could touch them, a shadow lunged from the darkness and dragged him outside. His scream was cut off abruptly, replaced by the wet crunch of bones snapping. Panic erupted. The older woman shrieked. The teenage boy yanked out his earbuds and pressed himself against the window. And Eliza stumbled back, her mind reeling. The little girl, however, remained calm. She continued drawing, her pencil moving in slow, deliberate strokes. Eliza scrambled back to her seat. "What the hell is going on?" she demanded, looking at the girl. The girl didn't answer. Instead, she held up her notebook, revealing her latest drawing. The bus, engulfed in shadows, with clawed hands tearing through the windows and doors.